So I'm going to start with a little bit of religious gore, because I know how much you like a little bit of gore. So here we go. We're starting with this one. What's gory about that? I can hear you say, what's gory about that? She's got, I don't know, like a couple of cakes on a plate or a couple of jellies or something. No, she doesn't. This is St. Agatha, and actually what she has on a plate are her boobs. Yes, lovely. She's not looking terribly delighted with it, although she's not. She's a saint, so she is calm and sanguine, as saints would be. So the story of St. Agatha, she is another of these very early Christian martyrs. And as you can see from this painting by Zurbarán, this is a 17th century painting, dates to about 1630, 1633. As you can see, she's very beautiful, as they all are, these early Christian female martyrs. And so very beautiful, the daughter of a wealthy and noble family in Italy. And she decides very, very early on in her life that she is going to dedicate her life to God, and she won't marry. She's going to remain chaste, and that is what she wants to do. That doesn't deter suitors. So she gets a succession of suitors, she turns them all away, until one day this one particularly nasty piece of work called Quintianus. I think Quintianus. Let's put the emphasis where it should be, because he was a complete and she so he came and he said, hello, marry me. And she said, no thank you, I'm basically married to God. He wouldn't take no for an answer, so he thought, right, I know what I'm going to do. I am going to have her arrested and brought in front of a judge. Yeah, because that's going to woo her, isn't it? So he did. He had her arrested and brought in front of a judge, or the judge, and guess who the judge was? Him, Quintianus. So, as the judge, he said, well, you need to marry me or you're going to get sent to prison and tortured. And she thought, tough choice. I think, thank you very much, I'm going to go to prison and get tortured. And so he threw her not into a prison actually, but in typical nasty Roman governor fashion. This is exactly what happened to St. Lucy. He threw her into a brothel. So poor St. Agatha was in a brothel for a month, suffering all sorts of horrific insults. And then, he thought, well, that's definitely going to sort her out. She's definitely going to want to marry me now. So brings her back into court and says, you're gonna marry me now, Agatha? Mm-hmm. And she's like, no, thanks very much. But I don't think she said thank you very much. I think she's like, definitely not. He couldn't believe it. So then he said, I'm going to torture you again and you might even die. That's going to do it. He thought he clinched the deal that time. She said, no. So he throws her back into the brothel and she is tortured once again, and the torturers this time kind of really went the step further, and eventually they couldn't think of anything more horrible to do to her, and so they chopped her breasts off. Sorry, that sounds like having her breasts chopped off isn't horrible. That's really horrible. So this was the fate of poor Agatha. She kind of did die from that, because what happened was she was sort of left alone and had suffered all this torture, and essentially one day just kind of prayed to God to deliver her soul, and so she died. Happy story, but sometimes it's depicted like this. So this is an image by Sebastiano del Piombo, who was one of the leading painters in Rome in sort of the 1520s. This actually dates to 1520. So sometimes you can see this pretty sort of cringe-making image where, you've got the nipple clamps and goodness knows what else. So that's not very nice at all, is it? But mostly she's depicted like this, with her breasts on a plate like this, sort of presenting them to the audience, which is why she was from Sicily, actually. So in true Sicilian fashion, this is why these are their national dish, almost. It's a very popular dish. Mini di Sant'Agata, so the mini, the little cakes of St. Agatha. Some kind of pastry and ricotta cheese concoction, obviously with white or sometimes sort of pinky icing, and the obligatory cherry on the top. So there you go. So when you go to Sicily, when you're all allowed, well, we are allowed to travel again. So if you manage to get down there, you'll be seeing these in the bakeries, and this is what they are. So they're a reference to poor St. Agatha, who had her breasts cut off. Okay, I need to lighten the mood a little bit, but we're going to stay with breasts, but kind of more in a beyond the palate style, so more saucy than gory. Say hello to this lady. She looks like butter wouldn't melt, wouldn't she? So this is Sarah Goodridge, and she was an American artist in the 19th century. And she specialised in miniatures. Very ambitious. She did very, very well for herself at a time that it was really quite difficult for women to follow the profession of being artists, painting. So she became quite popular amongst sort of the higher classes and so on. Lots of people wanted miniatures painted, and she met, during the course of her work, this gentleman. This is a portrait of Daniel Webster. So Daniel Webster, this was painted by Sarah Goodridge, who was a politician and a lawyer, and they got on. And they got on really, really, really well, if you know what I mean. So when Daniel Webster's wife died, so Sarah was single, Daniel Webster had a wife and 3 children. But when his wife died in, was it 1828, Sarah was like, oh, that's so sad, yeah! She's probably had a little bit more decorum than that. And she thought, now's my chance. And she sent him, you ready? She sent him this. This is tiny. It's about 9.5 centimetres by nearly 7 centimetres. And obviously it's a miniature of her breasts. Absolutely beautifully painted. Actually, they kind of remind me, they're rather more... complete with a little beauty mark just here. Gorgeous lighting. So she's about 40 when she painted this. So I think she's looking pretty damn hot, in my opinion. Okay, so she sent him this. Did this encourage him to marry her? Did he make an honest woman of her? Did he? Heck no, he didn't. Daniel Webster was known as Black Dan in his circles. Remember, he was a politician as well as a lawyer, and basically he was very, very fond of his career, and so he married an American socialite who basically could further his ambitions. And poor old Sarah was well, I was going to say left behind. She wasn't left behind, because she actually painted him more than a dozen times, and there is correspondence between them. So they knew each other for over 25 years. What the nature of their relationship was after he married again is a little bit uncertain. But there we go. So she was following, by the way, in sending him this, she was following the tradition. There was a tradition that was more British than American, that lovers would send each other miniatures of eyes or lips. Obviously, she went one further and did her boobs. And why not? If you've got a pair of boobs like that, then I think you should show them off. So yes, never married, and we don't really quite know what Daniel Webster actually thought of Sarah Goodridge, but this was in amongst his possessions when he died in 1852. She died in 1853 actually. So okay, now are we ready for this? Are we ready for this next story? Painting, and it is a story. This is the one I put on my stories. Yeah, and it is pretty much just as weird as it looks. Yep, she is bending over. Yes, there is a horse tail involved. Yeah, possibly is going where you think it might be going. Who could possibly be responsible for this strangeness? It's Boccaccio. So this is from Boccaccio's Decameron. And if you remember, we had one from the Decameron last week. Which one did we have? Oh yes, lady who threw herself out of a window because she ate her lover's heart, which her husband had cooked for her. That was a whole other story, wasn't it? So this is another story from the Decameron. So the Decameron was written in 1350, thereabouts, after the plague of 1348, which swept Europe and really wiped out half of Europe, and that's no exaggeration. So this is what we can expect. This kind of story is what we can expect in a couple of years' time, I think. And the Decameron was a series of stories, just quickly, so 100 stories. So the conceit was that 10 people went to stay in a villa outside of Florence to escape the Black Death, and each of them was charged with telling 10 stories. So 10 people, 10 stories, 100 stories. So this is the 10th story, I think, in the Decameron. Are you ready? Are you sitting comfortably? Once upon a time, there was a priest in Italy. He was a very poor priest and was sort of a bit itinerant. So he would take his wares around on his trusty mare, and he would sort of sell things. So in the course of his travels, he met a gentleman called Pietro. And he and Pietro became quite friendly, and occasionally the priest would go and stay at Pietro's home. Now, Pietro himself wasn't very wealthy either, but he and his wife welcomed the priest, but they said, I'm so sorry, but we've only got one bedroom, so you're going to have to sleep in the stables, is that okay? To which the priest replies, okay, of all the things that the priest could have replied, yes, it's fine, I don't mind sleeping in the hay, it's perfectly comfortable, completely lovely, thank you very much for your hospitality. He replies, yeah, it's absolutely fine, I really don't mind sleeping in the stables because, don't worry, I can turn my mare into a lovely young woman. Yeah. So they say, they don't kind of think, okay, you're quite weird, and that's extraordinary. They say, wow, you can turn your mare into a lovely young woman. Does that mean that you can turn a lovely young woman into a mare? And what they're thinking, so they're all as bad as each other, these people. So what they're thinking is that Pietro's wife, who's called Giamata, could be turned into a mare occasionally because they're poor as well, and so it could help them transport goods and so on. And then she could be turned back into a lovely young woman when she's finished carting things around. So Pietro says, yeah, I can do this, give it a go. So he says to Giamata, right, and he says, oh, by the way, don't tell anyone about this. No kidding. So he says to Giamata, take your clothes off. So she strips down to her sort of shift. He's like, no, you need to take all of them off. So this picture is actually just for modesty's sake. So she strips naked. He casts loads of spells around her and incantations and sort of taps her. Woo! And then he bends her over, and instead of thrusting a horse's tail, as you can see here, into her, he thrusts his own tail into her. At which point Pietro is like, whoa, hang on a minute, mate. I don't think this spell worked. What are you doing? And obviously then the whole spell crumbled. He ruined it, Pietro. He ruined it. And reports were that Giammatta was really quite upset, and that she was rather enjoying herself. But anyway, I think needless to say, the priest wasn't really invited to their home again. Clearly he couldn't turn her into a mare, and clearly he didn't turn his mare into a young woman in the first place. And if he did, or if he thought he had, I just doesn't really bear thinking about, does it? Anyway, so this is a sort of slightly sanitized version, really, of this crazy story about the priest who said he could turn his mare into a beautiful young lady and that she would keep him company at night. Weird people. What can I tell you? Don't ever say that I don't bring weird stuff to these Elevenses. And on that note, I'm going to turn images off and I'm going to turn comments on and see what you made of that. Excuse me. Oh, see, I've shocked myself. Yeah. Never invite a priest who has a mare with him at all times to sleep in your stables. Definitely never leave him alone with your wife. That's what I say. That's the moral of this morning's Elevenses. Ricky, blimey, where'd you find these treasures? Secret places. The internet, the dark web. It's not the dark web. Yeah, they're all out there. You just have to know where to look. Oh, hi, Mike. Nice to see you. I know. It's I just like weird stories. I mean, what kind of a mind, what kind of a person was Boccaccio to think up that story? I don't know. And what kind of sort of religious mind back in the 3rd century thought up cutting off breasts? Oh, by the way, that one, most of that story is from, of course, the Golden Legend, that fantastic 13th century book of great stories. So, Lynne. Oh, Lynne thinks up these stories. Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. On that note, I will say goodbye. If any of you are around this evening, then do join me. I'm zooming in on Zeus. So that's just £10, a lot of fun, 8 o'clock until 9 o'clock. 4 paintings, Titian, we've got Tintoretto, we've got Rubens, we've got a gorgeous little painting by Pogliuolo. So really worth joining if you haven't joined one of them. And then I've got another curated canapes and cocktails coming up that's very exciting. It's sort of a little bit of a collaboration, this one. So next Friday, so not tomorrow, but next Friday the 31st, I am going to be doing my first live interview with an author and an artist called Lillian Milgram. So more of that later. So that's going to be at 6 o'clock on Friday because she is in Washington, DC. So Beyond the Palette is going international, and lots of things in the pipeline. So it's all exciting. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And I hope I haven't disturbed you too much. Bye.